Let's talk about some of the wildest legal cases in MLB history. It's arbitration season, baby. Followers of John Heyman on Twitter were recently treated to a late-night tweet storm about many pre-arbitration contract settlements across baseball. So what is arbitration? Not every player in Major League Baseball is eligible for free agency. The player is only eligible upon reaching 6 years of Major League service time or by being released before then. Every year, certain players who can't become free agents but don't yet have a contract with their team for the following year can settle with their club on a salary for that upcoming season. If the two can't agree, they exchange salary figures and schedule what's called an arbitration hearing to determine which of the two salaries the player will earn next season. They can still agree on a one- or multi-year deal before the hearing, but if at least one of them says no, they'll take their arguments there. Representatives of both the team and the player provide a 3-person committee with their salary asks, and both argue why their number is more fair. This leads to a final decision by the committee on which of the two will be the player's salary for the following season. 2023 will be the 6th year of Shohei Ohtani's Major League career. He was arbitration eligible again this offseason, and he and the Angels avoided a hearing by settling at $30 million for the 2023 season. It's his last year before becoming eligible for free agency and becoming the richest player ever. That $30 million is the largest pre-arbitration settlement ever agreed to, and it came just 9 years after the Angels set the previous record with Mike Trout for $1 million.
Michael, in order to expedite these negotiations, we are prepared to make you a very generous offer.
And we are prepared to reject that offer.
Michael, you haven't even heard.
Never accept their first offer. What is your second offer?
How's about
$1 million?
It took only 9 years for that record high to increase 30-fold. The previous record holder before Trout was a $900,000 settlement for Ryan Howard. Just as recent free agent contracts help set the market for other comparable Major League Baseball players, so do arbitration settlements. Garrett Cole won a case against the Astros in 2019 that doubled his 2018 salary after a terrific first season with Houston. That $13.5 million figure is the largest that's ever been granted by an arbitration hearing. There are two kinds of players who are eligible for arbitration: players with more than 3 years and fewer than 6 years of Major League service time, and Super 2 players with between 2 and 3 years of Major League service time who meet certain requirements. Once a player is arbitration eligible, they remain eligible every year until free agency, when they've either reached their 6 years of service time or get released. So if a player and a team agree on a 1-year deal, and next year that player is still under 6 years of service time, they'll go through this process again, and they'll do it every year until that player is eligible for free agency. Players that sign multi-year deals to avoid arbitration don't go through arbitration each year they're signed for in the deal. In 2019, sophomore Ronald Acuna and the Braves agreed to an 8-year contract extension that bought out 3 of his arbitration-eligible seasons, while also locking him in for several of his free agent-eligible seasons. If an unreleased player with 3 years of Major League service time signs a 2-year deal to avoid arbitration, they're locked in for their 4th and 5th years without arbitration, and then when that contract ends, they'll again be arbitration eligible for their last year before they can elect for free agency. He would have been done with arbitration if that same player instead signed a 3-year deal, being his contract would have ended after his 6th year of Major League service time, and after those 3 years, he could have signed with his team or elsewhere in free agency. Players and teams go to arbitration hearings with a clear priority of getting the best price for them. Avoiding a hearing is usually strongly preferred because the other thing at stake is the relationship between these two. MLB Network analyst and former second baseman Harold Reynolds recalled teammate Julio Cruz telling him, quote, "You never want to go in that room. You'll never be the same player coming out. You'll never see the organization the same way. The longer you can fool yourself that it's a business, the better off you are." The goal from the player's side is to argue why he's deserving of the salary figure he presents, and the goal from the team's side is to argue why he isn't. The job of a team is to essentially explain why a player isn't as good as they say they are, and you can imagine how this dynamic can strain that relationship. Most recently, the president of the Yankees and reliever Dellin Betances had a pretty public spat over their arbitration case. Betances, who closed some games for the Yankees the season prior, but primarily served as the setup guy, was asking to be valued at an arbitration hearing at a closer's salary, as opposed to that of a late-inning reliever, something Randy Levine was very publicly opposed to.
And in this whole process and saying how much they love me. But then, they take me in a room and they trash me for about an hour and a half. And, I thought that was unfair.
There have been some pretty wild arbitration stories since the 70s when this process first started. In 2000, Sean Casey hit 20 homers and slashed .315, .385, .517, good for a 124 OPS plus in 133 games for the Reds. He made just $400,000 that year and asked the Reds for $3 million in 2001, slightly above Cincinnati's offer of 2.6. Casey offered to compromise at 2.8, but the Reds would not go above 2.7. Casey won his arbitration hearing and enjoyed that $3 million salary in 2001, but not before putting his case in jeopardy, having shown up wearing a suit that he hadn't worn in months that was soaked in cat pee. One player in 1980 actually went to his hearing asking for less money than his team offered, which is funny because of the two parties involved, the Oakland A's actually weren't the cheapest ones in the room. In 1989, Cal Daniels' pre-arbitration settlement was decided by a coin flip. In 1986, Hall of Famer Wade Boggs was headed to his arbitration hearing with the Boston Red Sox. Boggs was one of the more superstitious athletes ever and apparently had something called triskaidekaphobia, which is a severe superstition of the number 13. So when Boggs found out his hearing was in room 13, he lost the case. In 1985, former Angels manager and then player Mike Scioscia was in an arbitration hearing with the Dodgers. The Dodgers actually tried to use his .407 on-base percentage against him. They argued that Scioscia was getting on base too much, and he was clogging up the base paths. A big thank you to Anthony Castrovince, one of my favorite baseball writers, for his article recounting several of these stories. And that's everything you need to know about arbitration in Major League Baseball. Let me know if you'd like me to keep making these kinds of videos over the next few weeks. See you next time.